History was made today when the Defense Department lifted one of the last bans on service in the armed forces. Transgender people will now be allowed to serve openly, and they will be eligible for any medically necessary care, including surgery.
Transgender people were the last service members who could be kicked out not for something they had done, but simply because of who they were. Defense Secretary Carter ended that today.
Effective immediately, transgender Americans may serve openly, and they can no longer be discharged or otherwise separated from the military just for being transgender.
Estimates of the number of transgender people in the military range from a low of 4,000 to a high of 11,000 out of a total force of 2 million. Army Reserve Captain Sage Fox found her career put on hold after she changed genders, even though she says it made her a better officer.
Transitioning has allowed me to be better as a leader. I've gotten rid of the distraction of worrying about concealing who I really was.
Fox had to rely on private insurance to cover her surgery, but from now on, the military will cover the cost of sex change operations approved by a doctor.
Our doctors will treat them and give them medically necessary treatment according to the protocols.
Once a service member switches gender, they would also switch to the barracks, bathrooms, and showers used by their new gender.
Every Friday inside this historic church, there's a call to prayer answered by hundreds of Muslims surrounded by Christian icons. Two religions sharing the same space.
It starts with people understanding each other, and then it grows to religions understanding each other.
Farouk Syed has been organizing these Friday prayers ever since the Church of Epiphany opened its doors to the Muslim faithful who needed a place to worship 8 years ago. The prayers began with 50 people. Now there are over 300 who pray each week with the church's blessing.
It's our job to be the hands and feet of peace in the world, and how do we do that? Is by loving one another.
I don't know if they ever thought that Muslims would come here and pray and become one of the biggest congregations of Church of Epiphany.
So your congregation is much larger than the church's congregation?
Yes. This is the biggest congregation that Church of Epiphany has, the Muslim prayers.
Not only do they feed my stomach, but they also fed my soul.
50-year-old Saeed Bond is homeless. He converted to Islam in his 20s, but found this prayer service by chance 3 years ago. He's one of dozens of homeless people who are part of this congregation. He now helps prepare the sanctuary for Friday prayers. For Bond, the church has become more than just a place to pray.
Look at that. I'm not Christian, but I look at that. That's beautiful.
And during the prayers, we heard a sound, church bells.
It's amazing, it's amazing to see two things together. Who can imagine, church bells ringing and a Muslim giving a sermon? It's a moment of reflection for people who think that we are different. We are all the same. We are all the same.
Muslims and Christians in unity in a church bearing witness to an epiphany.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the country will explore the use of gender-neutral identity cards. Trudeau made those remarks to Canada's CP24 during his time at a gay pride event in Toronto. The announcement comes 1 week after officials in Ontario announced they would allow citizens to use an X as an indicator of a third gender on driver's licenses. Trudeau is the first Prime Minister to march in a gay pride event in Canada.
Here's just one more thing to worry about walking down the streets of New York City. You are looking at surveillance video of a man in Manhattan running up to a woman trying to shove something down her pants. Police say that something, you see it happen there? That something is feces. He's apparently even wearing latex gloves, which he ripped off and threw away after his disgusting assault. Disgusting. There are reports this is the man's #2 attack using feces. It's not clear whether the feces came from the pooper scooper himself, another person, or an animal.
Surveillance video shows a suspect punching, kicking, and stomping on a Muslim teenager in Brooklyn, New York. The beating took place outside a mosque during a midnight prayer service. Graphic pictures show how badly the teen and his friend were beaten. The mosque is urging police to investigate the attack as a hate crime. One of the victims says the attacker called him a terrorist as he kicked him. Corey Saylor tracks cases of Islamophobia for the Council on American Islamic Relations.
I think it's unfortunate that what ISIS wants seems to be happening in the country. They want Americans to turn on each other, and that is what we're seeing at this point in time with a number of mosques or people who are apparently Muslim being targeted for attacks.
In Minneapolis, police are also investigating the recent shooting of 2 Muslim men as a possible hate crime. This weekend, authorities in Florida arrested 25-year-old Taylor Anthony Mazzanti in connection with the beating of a man outside the same mosque Orlando nightclub shooter Omar Mateen attended.
Turn to your left, or your right. Turn to your right.
Near Cleveland, a woman at a hotel saw a man in traditional Arab clothing and called police, believing he was a terrorist. Police handcuffed the man, only to discover he was innocent. The man collapsed after being questioned.
You okay?
Joshua Brown loved his Tesla Model S.
Car's doing it all itself.
All I'm gonna do with my hands down here. It takes all the stress out of it.
He posted 25 videos on YouTube showing off the car's self-driving feature. But in May, Brown was killed when his Tesla collided with a truck. The Tesla was in autopilot mode when it failed to detect the white truck against a bright white sky. The U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is investigating the crash.
We do know that the brakes of the car were never engaged, and so the car hit the truck at full speed, which is an indication that the driver was completely unaware.
The crash is raising concerns about the safety of self-driving cars.
The freedom of the open road may soon cost you, and it's why Andrew Zingale is using a special app.
It's called the Driveway app.
To send photos of his odometer to the state of California.
You take a picture, and then that's the reading.
He's one of 5,000 Californians participating in a 9-month experiment to see if taxing drivers by the mile can replace the state's gasoline tax.
So this is getting data from your car's computer.
That's right.
Brian Kelly is installing an experimental GPS mileage tracker.
When you plug it in, it lights up.
Kelly is also California's Secretary of Transportation.
The projections on what we'll get out of the gas tax are down going forward, so we have to find new ways to fund transportation.
California needs $8 billion a year to maintain its transportation infrastructure, but it only raises $2.3 billion from its 27.8 cent a gallon gas excise tax.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with the gas tax except for one thing, and that is that our legislatures have chosen not to raise the rates.
Asha Agrawal, director of the Mineta Institute's Transportation Finance Center, polled drivers on what they preferred.
You asked people if they would be willing to pay a penny per mile driven instead of a gas tax.
Yes, we did.
What did they say?
They said not interested.
Only 23% said they would support a mileage tax. Part of the opposition, the study found, is privacy concerns.
People get concerned when they hear about a device that tracks your location.
That fear is understood. However, this program is really about just knowing how far you're traveling.
Last year, Oregon launched a similar pilot, and last month, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Delaware requested federal funding to test it.
With a price tag of $100,000 US each, these puppies definitely don't come cheap. But that hasn't stopped dog lovers around the world from purchasing one because they know what they're getting, a beloved dog which recently passed. Since 2006, a South Korean company has made nearly 800 dogs for clients seeking to prolong companionship with their best friend. By harvesting, then transferring the DNA of an animal to a donor egg cell with its own genetic material removed, the facility can clone just about any, including cattle and pigs, upon request.
The Islamic State group has created a database of sex slaves and is using encrypted smartphone apps like Telegram and Facebook's WhatsApp to sell them. The captives, members of a small religious minority known as the Yazidis, are being exploited through a fusion of ancient barbaric practices and modern technology. In one encrypted channel, an IS fighter claims to be selling a 12-year-old virgin. She was priced at $12,500. Lamia Ajibashar, disfigured by a landmine, is a former sex slave. She considers herself lucky. Her two companions were killed in the blast as they attempted to flee Islamic extremists.
I survived them, thank God. I tried to escape them 4 times before, but I managed in the end, and thank God I managed to get away from these infidels.
Nearly 3,000 women are still enslaved. Lamia made it out, and she says one captor used her to help build bombs.
He beat me too, and he was doing everything to me also, and he was forcing me to help in his job, making suicide cars and belts.
Attempts to rescue the women have grown more difficult. Militants move them deeper inside areas it controls with each battlefield defeat. Escape is also harder. IS, also known as Daesh, uses the database to keep tabs on the women.
They register every slave, every person under the owner, and therefore if she escaped, every Daesh every Daesh control or checkpoint or security force, they know that there is this girl or this girl with this name, she escaped from this owner.
We reached out to both WhatsApp and Telegram. The companies stressed that they use encrypted technologies and content can't be searched when it's encrypted. However, when they are made aware of abusive content, including the selling of slaves, they take steps to remove that content or block the users.
5 of Lamia's sisters have made it to freedom. A 6th, just 9 years old, remains captive. Her parents are presumed dead, among the thousands of Yazidis massacred in what the United Nations describes as an ongoing genocide. Luke Sheridan, The Associated Press.
The Obama administration says it has killed more than 2,300 enemy combatants by counter-terrorist strikes, but it acknowledged the harsh reality that the once-secret drone program may have been involved in anywhere from 64 to 116 civilian deaths since 2009 in areas outside active war zones.
The president believes that our counterterrorism strategy is more effective when we're as transparent as possible.
But critics say they aren't transparent enough. Now it's the lack of precision in those numbers that's getting scrutiny.
We're going to be asking really hard questions about these numbers. They're incredibly low for the number of people killed who are civilians.
Even the highest U.S. government estimates are significantly lower than death totals compiled by watchdog groups. One estimates a maximum of 801 civilian deaths. The report, critics say, also doesn't designate the region where the deaths occurred or explain how officials determined who was an enemy and who was not. Since taking office, President Obama has significantly expanded the drone program. Earlier this year, he acknowledged there have been unintended consequences.
There's no doubt that civilians were killed that shouldn't have been.
In this latest reform of the program, Mr. Obama signed an executive order meant to protect civilians and make the public disclosure of civilian deaths by drone more routine.
It's a clear statement by the U.S. government that the protection of civilians is at the core of national interests, of legal obligations, and an ethical concern.